Hello, Taylor Alwood here with the Sacred Masculinity Podcast. Today, I want to talk about how to handle falling apart because this is a topic that I think is really hard for men. We're not really told how to handle falling apart. I mean, we've been raised with this idea of you got to push your pain and your emotions down. You got to keep everything to yourself. You got to be a stoic man. Well, the reality is that that's only going to work for you for so long, and it's really not working at all. Men have emotions just like women have emotions. I mean, women and men are people, right? We all have our emotions, and people who identify in other as non-binary are also people who have emotions. So the point is we all have emotions, right? And there's going to be moments in our lives where we're going to feel stress, tension, where something will be really upsetting and we're going to fall apart. And instead of trying to avoid that, because I don't think it's realistic to avoid that, I think it's important to recognize how to handle those moments and and uh, and how to put yourself back together. And I want to speak first to the unhealthy ways that people fall apart. It usually comes in the form of addiction. So like alcoholism, for example, or workaholism. Um, it's something where you're doing something to numb yourself to the experiences of the world around you, and you don't want to be fully present. And look, I get it. I've been there, done that. I used to be a workaholic. I would work all the time. Even when I wasn't working at my day job, I'd be working on my businesses. And a lot of times I did it because it was like, well, that's something that I am experiencing right now in my life where it feels safe to work on myself or to work on to just work at this job or work on my projects, but never have time for anything else. And it's really important to recognize that. And as I mentioned, it can also come in the form of alcoholism or really any kind of like a drug addiction or sex addiction or anything like that, where what you're doing is you're basically numbing yourself. When we numb ourselves, it's because we might temporarily get caught up in the sensation. Because, like, for example, if you're a sex addict, in the moment, the sex can feel really good, but it's also can be a numbing experience for you. Same thing for alcohol. Like you're drinking the alcohol, and at least in the moment, it can be like, oh, this is making me feel buzzy or whatever. But then you start to feel numb after a little while. We don't want to approach our lives in that way, and really, I see any kind of ism, as it were. I see any of that as really like if it's not outright a way of falling apart, it's certainly you're working your way toward that. Sometimes you're not going to be able to keep it all together. There's going to be frustrations and tensions and stresses in your life that will come at you. I think it's really important to normalize that and be like, you will fall apart. There are moments in time where you will fall apart, and you're allowed to have those moments of time. You're allowed to say, you know what, I'm falling apart here. I'm having a really rough time of it. Life's really hard right now, or whatever else. And mind you, I want to also advocate at the same time that like it's important to like recognize that you a lot of times you feel what you feel, but your feelings are not who you are, and you have options and choices and things that are available to you, and you just have to. But you have to be willing to give yourself permission to fall apart, because sometimes you will fall apart. There will be moments in your life where where a situation will not work out, or where you'll get challenged in some form or manner. And this is a perfectly normal and healthy experience in our lives. This is a normal way to go through life. And if we don't give ourselves that permission to fall apart, we might actually just be delaying the inevitable anyway. And I use myself as an example because the other day I had a bit of a falling apart. I had a really rough day at work, and I was dealing with some ongoing tensions, in myself as well. That things that I'm like doing my best to work with, but sometimes it's not always easy. And I gave myself permission to fall apart. Like there's nobody here who's gonna see if I lose my shit. And so I allowed myself to just fall apart. And falling apart for me was just kind of like having a moment where I let myself just like I went outside and I yelled. And then I ranted for a while to myself. And I you know after all that I ended up journaling for a bit, and I was kind of like, life sucks. I allowed myself to have that. And it's not that my life really sucks. Things are pretty good overall. And it's just that you have to have those moments where you allow yourself to fall apart, because sometimes you're going to have experiences that are really rough and tough. And it's not going to be the easiest way to handle it won't be putting yourself into a situation where you're like, oh, everything's going to be a-okay. Well, maybe not. You don't know. And it's important to recognize that you're allowed to have those moments where your life falls apart, where everything isn't coming together, and to not like put pressure on yourself to be happy or be okay, or whatever else. Like you can actually have moments where you don't feel okay, and that can and you can be okay with it. You can be okay with not feeling okay. So often we're told the way to handle emotions is to medicate them, or we're told, all these other different things. But what we're not told is that it's actually normal and okay to feel the emotions that we're feeling. So somebody who's feeling depressed, for example, I mean, yeah, is it hard to feel that depression? Sure. Is it a normal feeling? I think it is. I think it can be an indicator of areas of your life that you need to look at, like maybe where you're feeling anxiety or whatever else, and asking yourself the question what you can do about that. But I also think it's like let's give ourselves permission to just fall apart. Let's give ourselves a moment to say, yeah, I'm feeling really frustrated about XYZ. As long as it's not hurting someone else, and ideally you're not hurting yourself either. But as long as it's not hurting someone else, for you to just be like, I'm upset and I'm sad or whatever else, and all those other things, it's okay to feel it. Well, let me phrase that. Let me rephrase that. It's okay to feel whatever emotions you feel, but how you express or act upon them is the key. Like you want to do it in a healthy way. And like here's what not to do. Like one time I punched my kitchen sink and a pillar at my house. I was upset about something, and I punched it, and that was not the way to handle it. Why did I do it? Well, I was falling apart at the time. I was upset about some stuff, and I didn't handle it in the healthiest way. It was pretty unhealthy. And that's an example where sometimes, like for men, like we've been taught like, okay, you have to handle this emotion in one form or another, but you can't feel it. I think it's really important to feel the emotion and connect with it, even though it might be hard. Like if someone's angry at me, for example, that's hard to feel into, but it's important to feel into, because really they're coming at it from a place where they desire to connect. They're just feeling disconnected and they feel like they need to do something to get your attention. It's the same kind of principle at work here. So when you're feeling like depressed or anxious or any of those things, like you can have those emotions and acknowledge them. They're not who you are. They are experiences you are having in the moment. And that's an important distinction to remember as well. And give yourself that permission to just say, like, I'm allowed to fall apart here. I'm allowed to feel upset about something. I'm allowed to, but what I'm not allowed to do, what I ought not to do is something that is harmful to myself or to someone else, because at that point I'm taking it, excuse me, I'm taking it in a way, I'm expressing it in a way that is not that is actually that could create further imbalance in the environment and further imbalance within myself, but could also make someone else not feel safe. And all of these emotions and feelings and experiences and thoughts and all these other things, they are normal to feel. So be kind to yourself. Be good to yourself. Recognize what you're feeling and don't put so much stress on yourself. It matters, and it can help you feel more secure and grounded when you actually are able to say, like, hey, I'm falling apart here. I'm having a moment of I'm having a moment where I'm feeling really frustrated, or I'm having a bad day. And you don't even necessarily have to say it to someone else, although that can be helpful, but you need to be able to acknowledge it to yourself and give yourself that space that you can, in a safe way, allow yourself to fall apart without having to, excuse me, without having to put all that on another person. Those are my thoughts around this topic, and so I urge you to be kind and gentle to yourself. Remember that it is okay to fall apart, and remember at the same time that it's important to take care of yourself and love yourself.